All right, let's get this thing started. So hopefully everybody's in and connected and can hear me and see my screen and probably see me on the screen as well. Got the camera going today. So today we're going to do a little Panda talk, and we do these little sessions around, I guess, just trying to share SharePoint general information out to the community. Not so much product related, because if you didn't know, we'll go into it here in just a moment. But we are a product and services company, and so the goal of these Panda talks is really to kind of give back to the community, share some information, and to promote some conversation, maybe even. And to just build a relationship. So anyways, today we're going to talk about SharePoint site designs and site templating or site scripts and how and why we would use those solutions to templatize SharePoint sites and the provisioning of those as we move into the future in sort of a modern way. So without further ado, we're going to get started. Usually these Panda Talks are supposed to be sub 18 minutes, kind of like a TED Talk, but we're not going to try to hold ourselves to that today. There's a little bit of content here and a little bit of a demo. So you may see that this goes over just a little bit. It might be a half hour, but we'll just get started. We'll jump right in. And again, please do feel free to submit your questions there in the tool if you've got any as we go. If I can't get you an answer today while we're on this webinar, then we'll respond back to you with some answers. Or if you're better suited to ask those questions through email, please do send us an email at sales@bamboosolutions.com, and we'll get back to you with some good feedback. All right, so let's go ahead and get this started. So first things first, we are Bamboo Solutions. We've been in the industry for a couple of decades almost already. Kind of, if you've been in SharePoint for a while, you've probably heard our name before. We've been doing products for quite some time. A lot of what people don't know about Bamboo is that we are also a services company. And we like to highlight that because we have this great expertise here in-house at the company that can provide SharePoint consulting services and pretty much, for that matter, any Microsoft consulting services. But we primarily focus on the Office 365 suite or Azure, and how that connects to the SharePoint world, whether that's through hosted SharePoint VMs and in infrastructure and the hybrid scenario, you name it, we do everything in SharePoint. So a lot of people don't know that about us. So please do check that out. Our website's full of great information on what those details look like and the kind of packages we have around services. But yes, we're products and services. We're in the process of migrating almost all of our on-premises solutions that we've been developing for quite some time into into web parts that work in both on-prem and in the cloud. So we're converting everything to sort of get off of that .NET C# world and that platform and get over into a JavaScript world that kind of lets us put these things wherever you want them. We are a gold partner. We've been working with Microsoft for quite some time and sort of maintaining that relationship with them. So we're proud of that. We've been around, like I said, for a long time. We've got a lot of great customers we've supported over that span of time. A couple of flex names there on the screen, but we're really proud to have had them as customers and to continue to support customers like that. We do support customers of all sizes, ranging from small businesses all the way up to major enterprises, and then obviously the government and DoD and all that. So anyways, that's a little bit about us. There's a lot more to be said about us, but we're going to jump straight into the demo or into the webinar here. So what are we doing here today? We're talking about the process of site creations in SharePoint Online specifically. So what we're going to talk about today was SharePoint site designs and SharePoint site scripts. This pertains strictly to SharePoint Online. So anything you see today will only work in SharePoint Online tenants. It does not work currently, as far as I know, unless there's some preview or beta out there. It does not work in the SharePoint on-premises world. So hopefully the focus of this webinar today still has your attention and we're moving in the right direction. And if you're not already on SharePoint Online and you think that might be in your future, please do kind of take this in and start to generate those questions and send those to us so we can kind of get you a roadmap moving forward. But what we're talking about today is modern site creation. And so the site creation process, if you're in the SharePoint Online tenant already, you might be very well familiar with. You've got a couple of options as you go through that. You can see there on the screen, there's the left screenshot. Talks about creating a site, right? And we have two options primarily, the team site templates or the communication site templates nowadays. There is another options there down below that kind of lets you dig into a little bit more of a granular site creation process with some more advanced settings, etc. But primarily you got team sites and communication sites. And so what we're going to talk about is how we can extend the capability of our site provisioning options using SharePoint site designs and site scripts so that we can start to either set default capabilities and functions for SharePoint site creations or extend by creating new options as templates for creating those. So on the right side, you've got a couple of examples from the SharePoint Lookbook. If you're not familiar with that, it's a really handy tool from Microsoft. You can go to lookbook.microsoft.com and you can check that out. Quick way to provision site collections with all kinds of pre-configured and pre-set up sample content that helps people sort of visualize what they can do with SharePoint. And so that's one way to start provisioning site templates or site collections is to use that lookbook. Another way is the standard out of the box way. And so let's see. Yep, let's just get right into what are site designs and site scripts. So we go through the process of provisioning future site collections, doing that out of the box method there, right? So as we do that, and we want to extend, when we go to provision a brand new site collection, we want to extend that by adding additional functionality. So when a site is provisioned, we want things to happen after that site's provisioned. Like maybe we want to provision additional lists and additional columns, and we want to start to templatize those things so that future sites that are built have the same standard that we want to sort of roll out to the entire organization, or maybe even to just a subset of the organization. So to define what these things are, a site design is a collection of actions that SharePoint runs when creating a new site. So you can kind of think of a site design as a sort of a template, right? The template itself, the name, the thing that we will point to when we're ready to create a new site based on a template, those things are called site designs. Now, site designs have a lot of actions that describe changes to apply to the new site, such as creating a new list or applying a theme. So this definition here comes from Microsoft documentation, which I have a whole bunch of links at the end that you can see. And so a site script, if we get a little bit more granular in the process of templatizing and this provisioning process, site scripts are those JSON files that currently allow us to configure and specify those actions that run when we create a new site. So kind of think of it as you can have many site scripts that sort of define what should happen after a site's created that are related to a single site design. So for example, a site design, we're going to have a use case that we're going to walk through here in a moment. But for example, you may have a project site type of template, right? So we all are familiar with using SharePoint probably for project management in some way or another. And so we may have a site design called project template or project site. Well, that could contain many site scripts, and those site scripts can have all kinds of things in them, and we'll touch on what those things can be. But the ultimate goal of site scripts are to actually go and start the provisioning of additional resources when we build new sites. So I hope that's clear. Let's move on and see if we got any questions that come up as we go. So why do we need site designs and site scripts? I kind of explained that just a moment ago, but it really is to extend that site provisioning capability so that we can completely customize our organization's default or even custom templates for sites moving forward. There are a lot of use cases for that. We used to, back in the day, if you recall, use save site as template, and that was our method for sort of creating something that could be reusable in the future. And we would save that site as a template, and then in the future we would create new sites based on that template that we saved. Well, this is the modern approach to that. If you listen to Vesa from the P&P team over at Microsoft, he speaks very clearly about how save site as template is bad, SharePoint site designs and site scripts are good. So that's the direction we're headed. And so this is that future leaning. Okay, so an example use case, I mentioned this just a moment ago, an example use case that, I've been working with many customers here recently, and this topic continues to come up, and hence I'm doing this webinar today to kind of dig into it and try to bring some awareness to the capabilities that are out there. Well, one of the use cases that I'm seeing over and over again is projects, and that's why I kind of mentioned that just a moment ago. Project Hub, right, for an example. We want to sort of hubify our project structure so that these projects can go on the side as site collections, and then we can actually use a hub to roll up a bunch of that content from those project sites so that when a user hits the project hub, they're getting audience targeted practically content based on all of the projects that they're involved in. So if they're a member of project A and B here and they hit the project hub, we might be able to surface some of that content so that they're aware of what's going on and they have sort of a consolidation point of that content. So for this use case, we may have a hub, we may have a bunch of site collections that we want to be able to provision in the future, like a project site here in this case. And when we provision that project site, rather than have to go into each project site and manually build list a planner, a little bit of an extension to the document library because we want to add some metadata to it, or associating a team to it, right? And then once we get into the list A here in this example, having to go into it and then configure a column that tracks this and that, and then another column, right? So instead of doing all of this manually and not using the old school way, which is not currently available for modern sites, this is the method. SharePoint site designs and site templates would accomplish this, or site scripts. So we would write a site script and we'd say, you know what? We want to do this. We want to build a list. We want to add some fields to it. And we want to also define some views maybe in that particular list. And it gets way more advanced than that, and we can dig into that deeper. But for the basic high-level use case here, that's kind of what we're talking about, being able to templatize this process so that a user who has the rights to create future site collections can pick from a dropdown these site designs that we will define and have this stuff just sort of auto-populate through that new site collection creation process. Okay. So how are we going to do this, right? Here's a little bit very basic flow of how this looks to actually implement from a user's perspective of creating a new site collection. Now, currently, I will say, the process of defining site scripts and site designs is very administrator and technical-like. We will see at the end that the future to be of this particular solution does entail moving all of this into a more graphical interface that allows our power users, citizen developers, to take advantage of the SharePoint portal, the admin portal, or some portal that will allow them to navigate this stuff graphically. Currently, it's PowerShell based, right? So we're going to define site scripts and site designs using PowerShell. Once we've done that as a more advanced user, now our users on the front end, these are very small thumbnails, I'm sure, sorry about that, but as a user on the front end, when we go to provision a brand new site collection, we'll have this drop down here, right? So in this particular use case, we're picking a communication site. Well, site designs are populated here in this drop down. So when they go to provision a new site collection, they could choose from any custom ones that you've already established. And then they would give it a site name and they would hit finish. And when they hit finish, then the site provisioning process kicks in. And here's where the scripts start to run, things start to happen. In the meantime, while that's still running in the background, you'll notice up here in the second step here, there's a little bit of a warning that's populated. So the site will be built, then the scripts run. While the scripts are running, this warning at the top of that site will be available. And it will pretty much stop users from interacting too much with that site so that they don't do anything that could possibly conflict with the site script running. So here it says applying site design. We're updating your site based on the design you chose. You can actually view the progress of that site script running. And if you click that, view progress, you'll see something like this down below. And so what you're seeing here in this particular thumbnail, it's showing the step-by-step of what's happening and what's being provisioned in that site design, that site script that's running in the background. So you can see here, step one for this particular script was to create a site column called project owner. And the next one was to create a site column called adjusted price through XML, meaning they wanted to define the settings of that column through XML or as opposed to just a standard format. There's a whole bunch of things, right? And for this case here, they added project cost to the site nav after that. They also added some user principals, some security group permissions. So they added a principal for Jeff to the SP group owners, right? So that's just kind of an example of what the flow of how this actually is accomplished on the front end. Now, today's talk is going to get a little technical here in a moment, so I apologize if this is not best suited for your particular role in the organization, but just know that this is what we've discussed so far is sort of the flow of how this actually rolls out and can be used in some example use cases. So let's take a look real quick at what an anatomy of one of the site scripts might look like, right? So this could be very technical and over your head, and I apologize, but I'll try to make sense of this. And like I said, Microsoft is focused on making this a graphical experience so that users don't have to write this JSON format, JavaScript object notation. So in this case, if you just kind of just dumb it down a little bit, make it simple to understand here, we're talking about verbs and actions, right? So a site script has actions in it. And inside the actions, there's many of them. It's an array of actions that can be run. Every action is a verb. So if we just kind of look at it from that perspective, the first verb is to apply a theme, right? So pretty simple there. Verb, apply a theme. Theme name, give it a name. It will actually apply that theme to your site when the site script runs. The next verb we see here is to create an SP list, a SharePoint list, right? The list name being customer tracking. There are different template types that have codes associated to them. That's all you're seeing there. Well, creating a SharePoint list is a little bit more complicated than just creating the list. There's also other things you want to do with the list, like potentially add additional fields to that list. So things like that, like creating a list, have the ability to have sub-actions. And so we see another array there of many actions that can live underneath a parent action. So in this case, the verb set description for this particular list, right? And we can go ahead and set that. We can add an SP field. So if we add an SP field, then we got to tell it a type of field we want to add. We can give it the display name of the field. Is it required? Add to default view. There's some other options here as well. This is just a basic implementation of this though. So, here we are adding, a series of fields, 1, 2, 3, 4 fields to this particular list that we're creating when the site script runs. So just wanted to highlight real quick, this JSON is very customizable. It's being updated all the time. If you're familiar with PNP PowerShell and all of the things that you can do with that, the goal Microsoft has is to make site scripts become in line with everything that the PNP PowerShell framework can do right now. So this particular methodology is a little bit limited. It is a little bit early in its game, but it will become feature rich to meet everything that the PNP PowerShell can accomplish against your SharePoint Online tenant. So site scripts, right? So we have someone write them up. Here's a list of supported functions currently in site scripts. So you'll notice you may feel like it doesn't really meet your needs because you have much more complex processes that you need when it comes to templatizing sites moving forward. Well, there are more advanced options already available to kind of extend what this out-of-the-box feature set contains for supported functions. And you would do so by triggering flows currently. So if we could just look real high level here at the supported functions, we can do things like create lists and libraries. We can define new site columns and content types. We can adjust navigation as we see fit. We can apply themes and branding properties, and we can actually join hub sites. We can even install add-ins or solutions. So as you provision a new site collection for a project team, maybe they need this add-on in their site collection. You could go ahead and automate that process here. Now there's registering an extension. We can activate features. I'm going to skip over that. Configure regional settings, add users to SharePoint groups. Very handy for trying to automate that process as well as manage some guest access. And there's a whole bunch of stuff coming down the pipeline. If you look online, which I'll have some links to here at the end, there are a lot of resources focused on this particular functionality right now because it is the future of SharePoint templatization, in my opinion. And I think in Microsoft's as well. So in the future, we'll have the possibility to create modern pages. From what we're hearing right now from the PNP core team, that's a very difficult thing to accomplish, and so it's taking a little longer than anticipated. We can set site classification, and I'm assuming that means things like sensitivity labels and other things, potentially around sites when they're provisioned. As well as working in that complete UI-driven approach to management of all of this, right? Including a site script editor, a manager of those scripts, a relationship builder to site designs, right? All that stuff coming to the front end eventually. Now, the one thing I want to highlight on this page is that trigger a flow option up here. And so this is where we can take this into a much more advanced process than just doing the things you see on the screen currently. Anything that you can imagine doing to your SharePoint Online site through PowerShell or through Flow actions or through Azure Functions even can be initiated through a Microsoft Flow or a Power Automate, as they call it nowadays. So that is our ticket to really kind of using this functionality, sort of using the site creation process as a trigger for starting other processes in the background. Triggering a flow here is our ticket to do that. All right, so scoping is another big deal. We're always concerned with sort of who's building what and who has access to build what with what tools, right? And so scoping's been included. That is a part of the process now. So you can actually scope by user or mail-enabled security groups. Now, that's very specific there, and I called it out because it is very specific. It does have to be a mail-enabled security group at the current time. So what that means is that we could configure site designs to be available only for HR to use a specific site design that we've uploaded into the system. So for instance, we may have, just to keep on the project management track, maybe we've got a project management security group or a project management team. It's mail enabled. We can actually assign them to be the only ones who can view a particular site design so that when they're going to provision new sites, maybe the project site based on our template that we've uploaded, they should be the only ones that use that or see that. And so there is that capability to sort of limit that access. All right, just to get a little bit more into detail on that, getting more advanced, this is kind of this is on the Microsoft documentation site for how this process might look. This is just an example of saying, all right, we run a site script over here on SharePoint Online. Step one is to do that. Well, we can then say we want to run a flow, trigger a flow, like I said, to get more advanced. So it would, the only thing that goes from the site script to the flow is the SharePoint site URL that was created when we ran the new site creation process. So Microsoft Flow now has the context of what URL we're doing this as. And something you might do in this case is go and send that off to Azure Storage Queue. And Storage Queue is a way for us to sort of send a message to a service out in the cloud, and then something else can wait for messages to come in. And that might be something like an Azure function. So an Azure function could be sitting there just kind of looking at the storage queue and just waiting and waiting. And finally, someone creates a site, Flow triggers an event, sends it to the storage queue. Now Azure function goes, ooh, something came in. All right, so what do I know? I know the URL of the site that was created, and I can use that now in this entire Azure function that can do pretty much anything you can imagine against your Office 365 tenant. Azure functions can be written in pretty much all programming languages. So if you've got C# people or Node.js people or Ruby or Python, right, you can write Azure functions to interact with the Microsoft Graph, the SharePoint Online, all the REST APIs, et cetera, right? So this really just kind of opens up the door to completing any of those actions you felt like site designs and site scripts may not be ready to accomplish, right? This is the method to get there in the current scenario. All right, so that's getting a little bit more advanced there. All right, so let's go take a look real world what that looks like. So I've got my PowerShell editor up here real quick. Now, I apologize again if this is a little technical in nature, but just want to real quick walk through what it looks like to do this. So I've got a developer tenant set up on Office 365. So I called that K-Creative here. That's my little moniker online, my alias. So my org name, I've set that to K-Creative, and then I'm just going to run a standard quick connect here to SharePoint Online Service using the SharePoint Online Management Shell. So I'm going to go ahead and run this code. I'm going to do this in real time with you guys. So I've got an account here, and it looks something like this for a developer tenant. And I've got a password, tenant level administrator access to do this. All right, so now we're connected. My PowerShell terminal here is connected to SharePoint Online, and I can do things. So first thing I did was I wrote a site script. Now this is a little bit more advanced than the site script I showed on the first slide earlier. This one's doing a whole bunch more. So this one's creating a bunch of SharePoint lists. Actually, it's creating 2 SharePoint lists. I'm using a template type. I gave it a list name. So we're going to create 2 lists called Project Activities and Project Collateral. I'm setting a description, I'm adding some SharePoint fields, but I'm getting a little bit more advanced here by using some samples out of the GitHub repository for the PNP team to do things like column formatting. So I'm just going to demonstrate here very briefly that I'm going to build some new lists every time a site gets created that's using my template. It's going to build a couple of lists, and it's also going to establish some columns in those lists, and then it's going to apply some column formatting to those columns. Which is kind of neat. It's a new thing. I don't know if you're familiar with column formatting or list formatting, but it do some really neat stuff. So this is a little bit more advanced. Some formatter JSON is being implemented here. I'm just going to skip through a bunch of this stuff. But here at the end, I got a couple more things I wanted to highlight, which is we're adding some nav links as well. So I'm adding a couple of nav links to the left navigation of a team site. So you'll see a couple links there when the site gets built. You should see project collateral, and you should also see project activities. Last but not least, something I wanted to demonstrate was the whole hub join process. So now, if I create a new project site based on this site design, I want it to go build the site, provision all these resources, but then I also want that site to be joined to the project hub automatically. And so we're going to do that here. So I've got my project hub ID, and then I've got the project hub name here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and minimize all that because it gets confusing. It's a whole bunch of JSON there. So we'll minimize that down. So the first, very little steps involved with applying site designs and site scripts. The first thing you have to do is you have to add your site script to your SharePoint Online tenant. And there's a command for that called add SPO site script. We give it a title, we give it the content, which is the site script up here in JSON format, and then we give it a description. So we can run this. So I'm going to go ahead and run my site script code here just to put that as a variable to use in the next command. You'll notice that ran just fine here. Now I'm going to run the add SPO site script command. Now I already have these in my my tenant. In fact, you can run a command to see which ones you do have in your tenant currently. It's get SPO site script. And if I run this, you'll see the ones that are currently in my tenant. So here it is. I've already uploaded it. But what happens is if I run this add again, it's just going to overwrite that one. And so we should be okay. So I'm going to go ahead and run this again to overwrite that. So I'm adding it. There we go. A couple of lines of output here, just kind of giving me the GUID for that particular thing that was generated. We have our title, description, content version, and then is it a script package? False, it says. So that's interesting. Oh, that's because that's coming soon, packages. So they're gonna, it gets really a little bit more detailed here in the future where we can now package a bunch of scripts together and include in that package document templates and things like that then get added to these libraries. So that's all, it's out now, it's just not documented yet. So that's coming, which is super exciting because I've seen a couple of the PNP core team members demonstrating the capability to build a library, establish content types, establish document templates so that when users start to use the site, the new button has all the document templates already set up and implemented. So they can go into their project site and provision brand new project, presentations that have branding in them already and all that great stuff. So that's coming as well in detail. So here, the next line, I'm going to set the site script ID so that I can use it here in my site design. All that means is I'm going to use this ID here for the site script. And so I'm going to run that code. Okay, got that into memory. And now we're going to run the final line here to add the design to my SharePoint tenant. We're going to give it the title, the Contoso customer tracking template here, or design. We're using web template 64, which is a team site template. There's a 64, 68, and something else. I think, and they're just variations of the types of sites you can build, whether that's communication site, or team site without a SharePoint or a 365 group attached. So this one is with the 365 group, 64 is the ID for that. And then we're going to give it the site script ID. And we can point to that variable I built right here and give it a description. And let's go ahead and run this thing. And that's it. So now we've got a SharePoint site design available to us in the back end of SharePoint or even in the front end. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my browser up over here. And what I can see is in this particular tenant, I don't have many sites, but I do have a hub and I have a project hub here, as you can see in the screen. Let me see if I can zoom in just a hair here. So we've got a project hub. I've got a couple of site collections I've already provisioned and doing some testing. And you can see that this particular site is related to the hub site, the project hub. Now, if I go to the create button here, that's one way to build a website or a site collection. Another way might be I'm going to go over to the SharePoint link here to get onto my SharePoint homepage. Let me close this out. So you may create a site from here. There's a create site button right here. So a bunch of ways to create sites. Now, between all of them, you have the same experience for when we're provisioning new ones and the options available to us. So if we know that I just generated a new site design for a team site template. If I hit this team site, now I've got the option. Now I need to go and clean this up because it's got a little bit of an anomaly here since I uploaded the same thing twice. But I got my templates here, right? The custom site designs, the site scripts behind them, all right here. So I can go ahead and select this particular site design. I can give the site a name. Let's just call this project ABC. I can set some settings here as you would expect in the standard site provisioning process. Give it some English. Yep, and we'll go next. Now what you're seeing is that it's creating the site. And so if I go to finish here, I should be redirected to the site. You'll notice the banner up top as prescribed or discussed earlier, sorry. If I hit view progress, you can see my site scripts running, right? It happened very fast because there's not a lot of detail to this one. But you can see the script ran and the steps that I had in my script are listed right here, right? I had this creator update a list called project activities. I wanted to do all these things in that list, so it did it. I create or update list project collateral, add project collateral to the site nav, activities to the site nav, and then I added it to the hub site. So let's go ahead and view the updated site. So I'm going to click on that. All right, so here we are in the updated site. Now there's a little bit of a caching issue when you build a site and add it to a hub. It doesn't automatically load the site with the hub's design as it's supposed to. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit Control F5 to clear the cache and adopt that UI. Oh, it doesn't look like it's applied yet. Huh, interesting. So what I just did was I clicked on project collateral and project activities, right? The site script said, go build these 2 nav links. Remember at the very end? And there they are. They're right there in the left nav, and they point to the proper location. So we got our site built. We have the hub association performed. As you can see, the hub navigation is available to us up top here, meaning we are now in the hub. If you ever want to see what the site design that is applied to a current site, you can come here to the settings wheel, go to site designs, and you can see which one's been applied, when it was applied, and then the steps that were used in the site script to provision this based on that design. So it's super useful. You can actually swap the site designs. So you could go to available site designs. And if you didn't know this, you can apply site designs to existing sites to go ahead and provision whatever resources the script is specified to do. So here I could do a different template if I had decided to change it, right? So a bunch of options there. If you're ever wondering what was actually provisioned, you could always come there and look at the list of actions that were taken in that site script. A couple of things I wanted to just highlight here was the functionality that was just deployed. So I don't have any sample data in this particular site because we just built it, but I'm going to go over to this other one that I built. And I go to the project activities list. And remember I told you we were using some column formatting, which was it's just awesome, right? It's a quick way to get some advanced look into your list views, right? So in this particular case, we provisioned a whole list called project activities, and we established 1, 2, 3, 4 additional columns using our site script. And after that, we said, you know, not only are we going to build this column, but we're also going to establish some JSON to format that column. So if I was to go look at the column settings, where is it? Column settings, format this column right here. I should see the JSON that I included in my site script. This is how you do these column formattings if you're not familiar. So all that is right here, still updatable and configurable. I can make adjustments to it to determine different settings for it. But just kind of highlighting and showing off some of the column formatting capabilities here and the inclusion of those into the site script. So you can really do some advanced things with this new templatization process, if you will. This particular field has like a progress bar type thing, just to kind of show fill of color based on what that number is compared to other numbers in the list. And then this one right here adds some functionality to clicking on some buttons, right? So I picked a person in my form here, or assigned to. All I did was pick that person, but with column formatting, I can describe that I also want a button to be added to the right to be able to mail that person immediately if I need to, with even some prescribed mail content. So anyways, cool stuff, right? That's just a real quick look at the actual implementation of building the site script, adding it to site design, and then actually using it to provision a site collection based on a template, join it to a hub, add some lists and columns and some column formatting and all that stuff. Yeah, I hope that was a great example of sort of the capability in a very basic form, what you can do with the solution. So let's get back over to the slide deck and let's take a look at what we got left here. COVID Kickstart, just wanted to put this out there. Got a couple of slides here after this, but just wanted to say that, you know, we're trying to provide assistance to other organizations out in the world that are currently trying to get back on sort of a full capacity or full bandwidth workload, right? And as you start to get into that, knowing that now that we've got this great services team, just wanted to let everyone know that we're trying to assist with that. So we do have some discounted rates for any projects that start here this month. And you would be able to use that rate through June, July, and August. So helpful links. This is where I pulled almost all of the content for today's discussion. So if you're looking to dig into it more, you really want some more information on how to do this stuff, these 4 links right here are amazing resources for that. So the GitHub site script sample, I'll just show you that on my screen real fast. This particular repository on GitHub has a whole bunch of samples in it. And this is where I pulled the ones I used today. I did configure a little bit of extra stuff in my script, but I took one of these scripts and I used it in today's demo and extended it even further. So there's some in here like applying site column and row formatting, which I did use. There's applying company themes. So you can click on these things. If you're looking to write some JSON or just copy and paste, you can do that. You can just come in here and say, okay, this is how I apply a theme, right, in my action in my site script. So that's a great resource for trying to get an idea of what samples look like. Then the Microsoft documentation, very good documentation on what's going on here currently. If you go to the overview section here in Microsoft Docs, starts you from the very beginning all the way to actually testing it out and creating your own samples. So here you can see that's where I grabbed the graphic from, all of that explained in great detail here, etc. Another one from Laura. Laura is a PnP core team member, and this blog post that she wrote is just probably one of the most thorough and descriptive in how to do all of the things around this and where they're going with the future of this particular functionality. So great resource there. Last but not least, there was a YouTube video here. It's called Getting Started with Site Designs in SharePoint Online. It's from the Microsoft 365 channel. Great resource again for kind of digging in and understanding how this process works technically. All right. I think that is all I have today. So where are we at? 12:42. Woof. Sorry, didn't mean to go so long. But I really appreciate everyone jumping on today and participating. If you have any questions, you know how to get in touch with us here on the screen. Our website is a great resource for good information. We will have a blog post up here momentarily of all of this content. Tomorrow, you should be receiving a follow-up email with a link to the recording of this video. So if you wanted to share it with a friend or just kind of review some of the details around it, you can do that. But again, we're here for you. So if you have any questions around what we've talked about today, I'd love to talk to you. The email sales@bamboosolutions.com. You'll get me or Rob, and we're ready to talk to you about how we can help and whether or not this is a good fit for the requirements you may have. So thank you all again. I'm going to go ahead and put this on mute for a moment in case any last minute questions come through and try to get those answered. Otherwise, we will cut off here in about a minute and a half. Thank you all. Have a wonderful Thursday.